Jimmy on the beat, boy. Jimmy on the beat, boy. Jimmy on the beat, boy.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, John J. II, here with our co-host, CFB Columnist, Insider, Sam Vitale. How are we doing today, Sam?
Hey, I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me out.
Of course, man. It's always a pleasure. Got some great stuff to talk about. Week 1 is behind us for college football. Obviously, a great time to be alive. We got NFL football starting tonight with the Lions playing the Chiefs. I know a lot of my Michigan people are very excited, very pumped up for that. Might have a little bit of Lions talk here towards the end of the show on the GCP. A little bit out of place, but you got to deal with it sometimes. So we got some big stuff to talk about. A lot of things happened in week 1 that opened our eyes, that showed us the light. The good thing about that, if you took advantage of it from a betting perspective, you could make some money. You could have made some money. The problem is Vegas is also getting more smarter, along with us. They're getting smarter with what they're seeing in front of their eyes, and our eyes were opened, to say the least. We'll talk about some games in depth, and I guess just from a blanket standpoint, Sam, what do you have to say about week 1 college football? Are you impressed? Are you somewhat, indifferent? How are you feeling?
I thought week 1 delivered. I think we got everything we asked for. Saw some great matchups. We even got a top 10 matchup. Got to see some ranked teams play conference games, which is pretty rare for week 1. I thought it was awesome. We got to see our upsets. There was some pretty exciting G5 games out there. So overall, I think week 1 was great, and I think it was a great way to just kick off whatever's coming next. So.
Yeah, it was a good kickoff. No pun intended. But, and we'll talk about our hometown teams, too, towards the end. We're not going to dive into those right now. But those, our eyes were open with that, too, on both sides, both Michigan State and Michigan. Our eyes were open. Maybe not in the best of ways, but we'll dive into that shortly towards the end of the show. Let's start with LSU and Florida State, one of the highlight marquee games that I had to watch, and I actually sniffed out Florida State with the upset there. And it's really hard. I mean, other than looking at it from a line/betting standpoint, I didn't see that as much of an upset as maybe Vegas did or other people did. But what do you have to say about that game, Sam?
Yeah, to me, I thought it'd be crazy to put money on that game. I fell victim of that last year. I had quite a bit on LSU, having no idea that Norvell was going to turn that FSU team around. I really wasn't very familiar with Jordan Travis at the time. I got very familiar
Okay.
with him after that game. No, I'm with you. I don't think it was as much of an upset as Vegas would make you believe, especially now. If you look at the score, you can see, okay, it looks like a blowout. If you watch the game, you can see Florida State's for real. That wasn't just some kind of stat-filled box score right there. They dominated that game. It was tight, of course, for a bit, but when Florida decided to put it into sixth gear, they took full control, and LSU had no say.
Yeah, it was really a one-track game there towards the end, towards the latter half, the second half, and even early on in the second half in flashes. But that first half, they were neck and neck. I mean, it's like they were going score for score, and it was kind of a neck and neck game. You're like, oh, maybe Vegas did have this one right. Maybe this line is accurate. But the more the game progressed, you saw the longevity, you seen the players that could withstand those tough moments. And obviously Jordan Travis and East Lansing's very own Keon Coleman showing out for the state of Florida and the Seminoles entirely in that big win against LSU. And Brian Kelly might have put his foot in his mouth. He could have, he said, hey, we're going to kick the shit out of Florida State, basically. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but something to that effect, he said. And there was memes all over the place, all over social media, even before the game was over, about Brian Kelly in that statement. So he kind of looked like an idiot a little bit. And I threw some jabs at him on the GCP last week. So it kind of followed through for me, and my beliefs came to fruition. And like other coaches that have participated in the coaching carousel to essentially chase the money, I'm with them to a certain extent, but when it comes to jumping ship from a program that already has a lot of promise, obviously Brian Kelly with Notre Dame, and that type of thing, it's just tough for me to get into that and believe in a new regime, even though the coach is following his dreams and going chasing the money and bringing his family down and creating a legacy, wanting to withstand and continue that legacy on. I've always had a little burr in my side for Brian Kelly, and maybe that's not warranted. Maybe it is. But I find LSU as a team that's very easy to root against. I don't know how you look at them or if you think that way at all, Sam, but how do you think Brian Kelly is handling this loss, and how will he move forward with LSU going forward through the rest of the season?
I think Brian Kelly spoke for all college football fans in the post-game press conference when he said, "This is not the team that I thought they were."
Right.
Literally, that was exactly my thoughts on there. I wouldn't really say I'm rooting for or rooting against Brian Kelly. I am really all for anybody who wants to come in and shake stuff up. Last year, he kind of had me on his side, going and beating Alabama, winning the Big Ten West. I was really impressed with them and that team, which is why I was really surprised by how this game turned out. If I was going to bet on that game, I wouldn't have taken the points that were laid. That to me is the perfect type of game to tease it and say, I think Vegas has this wrong. Now, admittedly, I would have done it incorrectly. I'm sure there's somebody out there who teased Florida State down to a touchdown and made their college tuition payment off of that.
Oh yeah.
But no, I think the big thing to take away from this game isn't just looking, like I said, at the box score. LSU played extremely sloppy. They've got a lot to work on. It's not that they don't have the talent. It's not that they don't have the coaching. They've just got to clean this up. They've got to clean up their act. And I think the question is for both teams, what are you going to do now moving forward? Can FSU take that dominance into conference play? They still have to play UNC. They still have to play Clemson. It's not an easy road. There's others that they have to play too that are considered tough conference opponents like Miami. But again, FSU's got to keep this up and prove that they can keep doing this to top level talent. And yeah, I said that. I'm not going to say LSU less than top level. LSU's a good team, and Brian Kelly's going to have to take that same exact attitude going forward as well, because he's not down in the rankings in the conference standings. I mean, this game means nothing as far as the conference standings. He lost this game last year, and they won the SEC West. So I think both
It's
teams
true.
just got to, if you're Florida State, you've got to keep honing in on what worked. And if you're LSU, I wouldn't say figure out what didn't work. I'd say clean it up. They played a really sloppy game.
Definitely. I think that's a big takeaway from week one games in general. Whether you won, whether you lost, you got to shake the dust off and say, hey, okay, whatever happened in that game happened. Now we got to move on. We got a lot bigger fish to fry down the pike. So to focus on that, to take the game with a grain of salt, whether you won or lost, is very important in these early stages, because it can be easy to get high off of a win, but also to break yourself down and crumble under a early loss. So that's just a little PSA / word of wisdom for every team out there post week one. Let's move on. Florida at Utah. Obviously, no Cam Rising with the Utes, but they still survived. They did a great job. Got the dub. What do you have to say about that game?
I was pretty impressed with Utah. I felt like Utah was imposing their will. I felt like they didn't look like kind of a one-trick pony. So a lot of people were anticipating Cam Rising's out. They're just going to run the ball. That's not exactly what happened. The Utes were able to throw the ball around the field as well as run it, and they played some lockdown defense. Graham Mertz put up what looks like in the box score some pretty good numbers, but they were able to stop him when it counted. And I feel like that was huge for Utah. And I think the question for them going forward, specifically this week at Baylor, is can they keep winning without Cam Rising? Because at some point, it might catch up to them. At some point, you need an elite quarterback, right? You've seen this all across college football. Michigan has been a great example. When Michigan had Cade McNamara, the new transfer to Iowa, that was one of the things that everybody said, well, we can't beat Ohio State with Cade. It turns out that he did. But being an elite quarterback, being somebody who can come in and lead the team in tough games, especially these road environments. Last week, they hosted Florida. I'm sure the stadium was 95% Utah fans. It's going to be different. Baylor's coming out with their back against the wall in this game. They just got upset by Texas State last week, and it wasn't
That's
good.
right.
I think they lost by 11 points, maybe 12.
It was more than 10. I'll tell you
Yeah,
that.
not good. So Baylor's going to come out like a pack of rabid dogs, and we're going to have to see if Utah can hold their ground there, and see if some relatively unseasoned quarterbacks can come in here and get the job done. I say unseasoned because it feels like Cam Rising's been at Utah since 2015. I know he hasn't, but it's
It
kind of like the
does.
Stetson Bennett joke.
It is. I have a really similar ideology when I think of Cam Rising, at the same breath with Stetson Bennett, because it's like, oh, these guys seems like they're ageless. They've been there forever. It's almost like the Perry Ellis memes that came out with him and Larry Brown that were from like the 50s, 60s. There was a meme that came out, or an image that looked like he was there, and he's been there for the last like 40, 50 years. But it's funny how that can happen with certain athletes that maybe either don't transfer, they stay at the same college for a long time, or they do transfer and they don't, enter the draft early, but they're still shining stars. They could if they wanted to, but they decide to stay back. So I have a good amount of respect for players like that. So moving on, let's talk about Louisville and Georgia Tech. That was a thriller. That one went back and forth, and you really couldn't pick who was going to win that game until the fat lady started singing. What do you have to say about that one?
My interest in this game was just simply that Louisville was picked to be a dark horse in the ACC. They don't have to play Clemson. They don't have to play FSU. People were saying that they could just go undefeated in the regular season. Now they still can. They won, right? But I don't know if you can take that level of play back into your conference, back into conference play, playing some tough opponents. I say now they have to play Duke. I'm saying it like that because Duke turns out to be the real McCoy here. All right, their win over Clemson is a huge deal. And there's a new threat in the ACC, and it's Duke. So Louisville kind of went from they could run the table, maybe not that hard, to now they've got to go play Duke, and they have to go to Miami. So those are going to be two tough games. If Louisville doesn't turn it around, they're going to be in trouble. And that's what I thought was interesting about this game was, they got a breezy season, but apparently week one is their toughest game, right? That's how they made it look.
Yeah, it is. And they definitely tested themselves. They tested their ability to stay in a game and to close a game out. It wasn't the most stellar performance. Yeah, it's a win on the win column, but not a real happy win, not a clean win, especially with some of the teams that you got to face. It is a breeze, but you got teams, like Duke, Notre Dame on there. Even Miami could pose a threat. Pitt and NC State, they're in there too. Indiana putting up good numbers against Ohio State. So you got some teams in there that are going to test you. Now, we'll see how they play tonight against Murray State. That might show their ability whether to take control of a game or not. Obviously, the ball is in their court to do that, but whether they do that or not is yet to be determined. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But there's potential. Still very early. Take everything with a grain of salt right now, especially because you can't draw conclusions, can't jump to conclusions too quick right now with any of these games. But let's move on. UNC against South Carolina, obviously big rivalry. What do we have to say about this game? Is North Carolina the real deal or what?
I think beating an SEC team is definitely a good start to becoming the real deal. I thought Drake May looked good in this game. I was more surprised by Spencer Rattler. I've never been a huge Spencer Rattler fanboy, I'd say, but man, his stat line looks a lot better than Drake May, and that's not a shot at Drake May. It's just you're not really supposed to go 2 touchdowns to 2 interceptions when you're being called the best quarterback in college football, not named Caleb Williams. People are talking about Drake May possibly being a top 3 pick in a couple years here. And he didn't look exactly like it. Now, fortunately, he's got a whole team behind him. They came through, they played well. This would have been another good example of when you've got a spread that's that tight. Instead of just taking the points that are laid, you can make some real money going ahead and teasing it. Now, I think you'd have been out of your mind if you'd have, said UNC minus 10. But these things happen. So overall, I thought it was a great win. I think as long as Mac Brown stays there, they're going to be a good team. If he can keep recruiting the way that he is, I think a lot of people forget that UNC is building quite a defense over there. They're known right now for having good corners and defensive backs. And I think they're going to be a real problem this year in the ACC.
Yeah, very similar to Duke as far as the defensive stats, defensive attributes, and that's what I've seen with this UNC team. And that just goes to show for both Duke, and we'll talk about Duke here shortly, and UNC. These teams are not just basketball schools, and if we see a Duke UNC football, I think the rivalry carries over, right?
Exactly.
I think it's a team rivalry. That'd be a hell of a game to see. So, looking forward to that. Those are big game recaps. That's some big stuff that's happening. That's where our eyes become open, is seeing games like this. How do teams play against other teams in a game one scenario? A lot of these players have never played a college game before. That's another thing that has to be taken into account. So take it all with a grain of salt, and we move on. We prosper. So some notable upsets: Fresno State at Purdue. I turned that game off relatively, maybe not early, but to the point where I'm like, okay, Purdue's got a handle in this game. I don't even need to watch this anymore. Then I look at the score at the end. I get notifications. My phone's blowing up. Fresno State comes out with the upset. What happened in that game?
First of all, I'm envious of you for being able to turn it off. I got trapped into Purdue -4 there. A lot of the questions were around having a new coach and having a new quarterback. And the way I saw it was, okay, you've got a new quarterback. It's Hudson Card. He came up from Texas. He's a bona fide starting quarterback. But what happened there? A lot of slop. That game was very sloppy. It doesn't look like Purdue is meshing well as a team. They've lost some pieces on defense, which definitely showed in this game. Fresno State is a solid G5 team. They're not typically known for putting up 39 points in their games, though. They've got solid defense is what they're supposed to have. So this one really took me by surprise. God bless you if you took the over and parlayed it with, Fresno State money line. I don't know that it's going to get much better for Purdue going forward. I think that this week they have an interesting game. They're at Virginia Tech. The reason why I think it's interesting is because it's kind of going to be the battle of two lower tier P5 teams, which is not something typically exciting. I just think it's interesting. Your bottom tier guy versus our bottom tier guy. Let's see how that goes. So I don't know. I think that Purdue's fallen very hard from being the Big Ten West champion last year. I really don't know if I see them turning it around. They've got some real tough schedule ahead.
Yeah, tough schedule ahead, and obviously a loss to Fresno State is not a good mark on your track record early on. Now, it's still early. I'm going to keep saying that. It's still early, so Purdue's going to be able to have the opportunity to shake the dust from this game, from this loss, and to pick up the pieces, but they're going to have to do it quickly. You don't give yourself that 1-2 game, slack anymore. You don't have that. You lose that. And even these big win now programs that lost, they have to face the same thing. So it's unfortunate for those teams to have to fight and to be resilient and to basically win out, to not only have the potential to win your conference. Now, a lot of these games aren't conference games, so we're not worried about that. These teams aren't worried about conference play right now. But for the overall bottom line, that's what they're playing for. And this is a bad loss for Purdue, and it basically opens up the Big Ten a little bit for record wise. And that opens it up for some other teams until we do away with divisions, which I can't wait for. And the quicker we can do that, the better. I'm going to enjoy the season. I'm going to really enjoy the season. But if we could fast forward into next season, I wouldn't be too mad about it. I don't know how you feel about that or not. Maybe a little bit controversial. I'm known for hot takes. How do you feel about that, the new structure?
I've got a terrible opinion on that. It's a real quitter's opinion, which is that I think no matter what happens this year, we've got next year, and it's different going forward, right? If you are a 9-3 team this year, you're going to miss the playoffs, probably miss your conference championship game. But next year, 9-3 might get you into the playoffs. And to me, it's a little disappointing to go through the season like that. Admittedly, it's a little disappointing to go through the season where folks are already talking about college playoff implications. I like to take this week by week. I cherish every Saturday we have during the season.
Of course.
And I don't like to look that far ahead. But with all the changes going on, it's really hard not to take a little peek at 2024 and think about what that's going to be like.
Exactly. And I think you said that very well. Obviously, take every game, every Saturday. Never take a Saturday for granted, even though you kind of get to a point of the season where it's like, oh, college football, who's on the slate? Let's check it out. Kind of take it for granted. It's like, oh, and then it's gone. It's like, oh, man, like I didn't appreciate that when it was here, that
Right.
kind of thing. So obviously, take every week, and it's a blessing. Every week's a blessing. Every day's a blessing. So, but of course, you can't help but look forward and put things in perspective for the future, because these teams, these programs, conferences, even broadcasting companies, they're all looking forward. They're all looking into the future, into 2024, when the new regime basically will take place and will take hold of the college football landscape. Let's move on. Got a couple more games here. Texas State at Baylor. That was probably, that might have been the upset of the weekend. Maybe not. It's in the top three. But to see that anomaly and to know who the Baylor Bears are, especially historically, knowing them as a win now program, seeing them in the playoffs and seeing them in big bowl games year after year, this was surprising. What are your takeaways here? How did this happen?
This was shocking to me. It didn't really look like Baylor had much going on offense, at least in the first half. And then you go and you see what their defense does throughout the rest of the game. It just looks like they are really suffering from a lack of recruiting talent. I might be off here, but I don't remember seeing any massive transfers this portal cycle going to Baylor. I don't know what's going on down there, but they've not done a great job of making it attractive for talent. And I think you're seeing that. I think you're seeing a team that's riddled with 2 and 3 stars just get matched up against a team of 1 and 2 stars who want it just a little more badly, and that's what happens. I don't think there's a crazy talent gap there. Texas State, it's still Texas, and they take their football very seriously there.
Oh, they do.
But this one just looked like somebody wanted it a little worse than the other guys.
Yeah, that's basically the tale of this game, is a team wanted it more. And basically that's going to be the tale of the next game we talk about too, which is Texas Tech at Wyoming. I mean, that's a big win for Wyoming. And I also saw Josh Allen tweeting at Patty Mahomes both before the game and I think after the game even. And to see that they won in overtime, it's almost like that was written in the stars
Yep.
based on what happened in the playoffs, a few years back with the Bills and the Chiefs. In overtime too, just kind of just the stars aligned. It was like a constellation in the sky, and to see Wyoming win that game, obviously huge win for their program. What are your takeaways for this one?
I really like what Joey McGuire's doing down there in Lubbock. I had higher expectations for Texas Tech, and of course, it's a non-conference game, so everything is still on the table. It just kind of makes their wiggle room a lot less when you go ahead and lose to Wyoming. We've seen this in the past where an early loss sometimes doesn't affect you as much as a loss later in the season. So, with any luck, Texas Tech will benefit from that. My issue is just looking at that game. A lot of people want to talk about the implications, especially coming into this Saturday where Texas Tech hosts Oregon. And there's a chip on the Texas Tech Red Raiders' shoulders because the guy taking the snaps, a transfer from Oregon. A lot of people are saying don't take this spread. Oregon's favored 6.5. That's what I got them at. And a lot of people say don't do that. It's a trap. Texas Tech has their back to the wall. They're pissed off. They're at home. They're going to sell the stadium out with however many it holds, 80,000 pissed off fans who want to see the Oregon Ducks heads on sticks. And I'm just not. I don't think I'm falling for that. I think you're going to see a Texas Tech team that just doesn't have the talent to match up with an Oregon, especially when you've got Bo Nix back there throwing the ball around. I think it's going to be lethal, and I'd take Oregon minus 15 in this game. I think they're going to get stomped. I don't think Texas Tech is like Brian Kelly would say about his team, the team that we thought they were, and I was really excited for them. I was excited for not just this season, but next year once Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC. Could this be the Texas Tech show? And of course, it still could be. We might just have to wait on that till next year.
Yeah, pressure either makes diamonds or breaks pipes. And I think in this situation, it's breaking the pipes in Lubbock just because I'm not seeing what I expected to see out of this Texas Tech team. And to not see it early against a team like Wyoming, I'm seeing them fight. I'm seeing them almost, gasp for air. They're trying to get their, the Wyoming's hand off of them. They're dunking them. And it's just like they're gasping for air. They can't get it. So to see that against a team like Wyoming, that only leads you to assume what's going to happen against Oregon, what's going to happen against, Texas. So I'm worried about this Texas Tech team, and I don't think I can put my faith in them going forward week after week unless I see some major changes.
Yeah, I'm with you there. If they're going to do it, they're going to have to do it this week because starting out a season 0-2 is not a good look.
Not at all. Last but not least, we got Clemson and Duke. That might be the top of the list as far as surprises of the weekend, and it capped the weekend off very well. I'm glad that was a Monday game, Labor Day game, and very fitting. Huge performance from Duke. Jordan Waters, just amazing. No passing touchdowns for that quarterback. But, hey, it was a great game for Duke. Not a good game for Clemson. Dabo Swinney's in trouble. Clemson, it may be the most prominent win now program in college football, at least before Monday. So, I mean, they've kind of, since Trevor Lawrence left and that regime shift kind of changed things and shook things up a little bit, Clemson's kind of been shaken. But Cade Klubnik, I don't know. Is he the answer? I know he's very green. He's very green. So he's got to get broken into college football and that lifestyle of being under center for a major team. But can they pick up the pieces and move on with grace, or do you think this is going to be a tough rebuild?
It's going to be an uphill climb, especially since this was a conference loss. With a storied team like Clemson, I would never say never. I just tend to lean towards the side of I think the Clemson reign that we knew them as the multi-time college football national champions of the 20 teens. I don't know if we're really going to see a Clemson that dominant again. That's all going to go on Dabo Swinney's shoulders, how he wants to operate going forward. I'm more interested in looking at Duke. I think Duke is the real deal, and I'm very excited to see how the season goes for them moving forward. It's always exciting for me to have a new player in the game, and Duke, I wouldn't necessarily call them the newest player. They went 9-3 last year. They're a good football team. They've been solid, and they're just building on it now. They've got a quarterback in Riley Leonard that a lot of people think is NFL draft ready after this season. A lot of folks are talking about him being a top three quarterback in the next class. Based on what I saw, they're right. He looked like a stud out there. Duke's defense looked locked down. Obviously, they didn't just look locked down, they were locked down. I was really impressed. And I'm just really excited to see how this season goes for both of these teams. Like we talked about earlier, there's questions that you have to ask after these games. Can Clemson get the ball rolling? Can Clemson and can Cade Klubnik find their groove on offense? And how is that going to translate down the road in hostile environments? Um, you know, I don't want to say Duke's not a hostile environment, but it's definitely not playing in the horseshoe. It's definitely not playing in Happy Valley in a whiteout under the lights. So they've got a long way to go. And I'm just excited to see how that's going to play out for them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to say the least. So a lot of rebuilding going on in the ACC, a lot of picking up of the pieces in the ACC as well, and just the Southeast, both to embody the SEC and the ACC. There's some surprising things happening down there, and that only begs the question of how interesting do things get once the conference carousel takes effect. Who's going to align with the ACC? Who's going to jump ship and go to the SEC? We might be jumping the gun there a little bit. Let's move on for now. Is Colorado legit? Big win over TCU and the Horned Frogs. Obviously, Coach Prime is going crazy out there in Colorado. He's wearing his cowboy hat. He's kind of looked like a jackass. I'm not really jumping on the Coach Prime train. I just can't do it. I love the Aflac commercials. I love his hype. He's a funny guy. He's a really funny guy, and I enjoy his personality a lot. But to jump on the Colorado Buffaloes ship, I don't know if I'm jumping on yet, packing my bags and throwing them, jumping on, grabbing. I'm just not there yet. But I know a lot of people are drinking that Colorado Kool-Aid. How are we feeling about Colorado right now?
I'm gonna overreact to their win at TCU last weekend.
Okay, rightfully so. You have to. You can.
I'm definitely not a Coach Prime fanboy. I'm definitely not buying all into him. I'm just really impressed by what I saw. You can shake it, spin it however you want to. Shader Sanders threw for over 500 yards. I don't think he threw a pick. Travis Hunter playing both ways, getting 119 yards receiving and getting a pick in the red zone. I mean, they've got talent. Coach Prime, his antics get to people and whatnot. He's really out there and flamboyant, but he wasn't lying when he said, I brought my luggage and it's Louis. I'm excited. Like I say, I am overreacting. If they win this week hosting Nebraska, not that Nebraska is a front runner to win the Big Ten this year. Sorry, I saw a note. Not that Nebraska is a front runner to win the Big Ten this year, but they're another legit P5 team. That's what I was so impressed about with their win over TCU. They could have scheduled Sisters of the Poor for week one and ran it up 81-7 on them, like a lot of other teams do, but they didn't. They're going to play back-to-back P5 teams, and I'm very excited to see it. If Colorado can not just beat, but if they can handle Nebraska this weekend, I might be all in on the Coach Prime train. Now, I'm not going to pick them to win the Pac-12 this year, but if there's a sports book out there, and if there is, let me know. I would put money on Colorado winning the Big 12 next year when they join that conference. I like them that much already. I think Coach Prime obviously knows how to use the transfer portal, whether or not, he had to. I mean, he obviously had to. So, you got to sink or swim. So if you compare that with some recruiting, which he's already got some good recruits, he got Cormani McClain. He's one of the best cornerbacks of the 2024 cycle. He brought him there. Who else can he bring there to keep building this team?
Obviously, this builds up the transfer portal stock for Colorado. So, I mean, we're expecting it. Got a comment from our Massey. Put the bank account balance on Colorado to cover against Big Red. He is not feeling Nebraska. He also has another comment here, says Nebraska is trash. Listen, I kind of boosted up Nebraska in Big Red a little bit last week in last week's show. And I was talking a little bit of shit, maybe a little bit for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. But it's because of their fan base. What can their fan base do to get behind the team and to make things happen? Obviously, there's still a prominent team in the Big Ten in Nebraska, even though they're kind of towards the dregs. If you're thinking of the Big Ten as a whole, they're kind of towards the bottom of the barrel a little bit. But if Colorado can come in and win that game, I mean, that's a statement. A statement has been made. And I think it's a good matchup for Colorado coming off of a win against the Horned Frogs and a good test for Coach Prime. Can they contend against a team from the Big Ten? And I think we're going to see a good game there. So I'm excited for it. Do we have a spread for that game yet?
I think I got it at 6.5.
6.5 favoring Colorado?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, it might have been 3.5.
Okay.
I can check that out.
Yeah,
I know
I
it's
can
moved.
see that changing. I can see that changing a little bit.
There's a few games I've referenced that have moved quite a bit. I mean, when I say quite a bit, I mean a few points. I think I got Oregon minus 6.5 and Utah minus 6.5 at a pretty good clip there. Those have both moved.
Yep, Cody's got 3.5 in the comments. So that's where it's currently standing, and we can expect that to possibly even move down to 3 or go up to 4. But you see those trap spreads get thrown in there, especially in early season games. Trap spread is basically 7, 14, 3. Probably and arguably the worst spread in football is 3. So if you can get that 3.5 or 2.5, obviously still tight, but you're going to have an outright winner at the end of it. So we'll look forward to that game. I'm looking forward to see if Colorado can keep the foot on the gas and keep things going. Is Coach Prime the real deal? And moreover, is Colorado the real deal? Only time will tell. Come back to me at week 4 and we'll answer that question again. Let's move on. Let's talk about Ohio State's offense. What's going on with the offense in Ohio State, in Columbus? What's going on? Will we ever get to see Devin Brown? And will we see him this week against Youngstown State? Questions I got, Sam. What do you got?
So I'm actually not going to overreact to this one. I sound like a dad, going through an open house with his son who's looking to buy his first crib and knocking on the wall and saying it's got good bones. But that's what Ohio State is. They've got good bones. Kyle McCord didn't look bad. I thought what looked bad was Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka only combining for 5 receptions. That looked bad. The running game still looks good, though. I think people kind of exaggerate a little bit when they talk about Ohio State's running back room. I'm partial to Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. I'm partial to Nick Singleton and the rest of the running back room there at Penn State. I get a little fed up when people talk about how deep Ohio State is. It's like, show me the numbers. Well, they did. They handed the ball off to, I think, maybe eight different guys in the backfield, and all of them ran well. I think the only person with negative yards was Devin Brown. Must have got sacked. I'm with you, though. I do want to see Devin Brown, 5-star quarterback. Not that Kyle McCord isn't. It's just, to me, it's a similar situation of what's going on at Michigan. I want to see Alex Orji play. This is a preseason game, just given kind of that Indiana's really one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. I would have expected Ohio State to get Devin Brown some more reps. He only got 3 snaps, and I thought that was really underutilizing him, especially since I think this could have been a similar situation to last year. Michigan had Cade start game 1 and JJ start game 2. And then they'd split the third game, and then they'd find out who the quarterback is. This was the perfect way to do that for Ohio State. I mean, Devin Brown could have handled Indiana by himself, just like Kyle McCord did. So I'm hopeful that we'll see more snaps for Devin Brown. I'm interested to see what he can bring to the table. But I don't think Ohio State's in trouble. I don't think they're in trouble at all. I think they just kind of ran into a hostile road environment. We talked about, knocking the rust off in week 1. And I think that Ohio State's going to start to click. They've got 2 more preseason games here coming up, if you will, in Youngstown State this weekend, and then Western Kentucky next weekend.
So 23-3, the final score against Indiana in Indianapolis. So it is what it is. 23-3, not a bad margin to win by, but I know it was 10-3 for a while. And, just kind of, you expect Ohio State to either, stomp on them, or they're just going to keep it close and it's going to finish as a close game. This was kind of neither of those. And they seem to pull away at the end, but like we've been saying the entire show, it's too early to tell. Take every game with a grain of salt. That was a trial game. These early games, they're not like the NFL. They don't get preseason games that are not on the record. They have their early games. So they're going to play those new guys. They're going to shift a couple guys in at quarterback, and they're going to test things out because this is their only opportunity to do that. So we'll have to see. Time will tell, and it is what it is. Let's talk about Clemson one more time real quick. Is this the end of Dabo? Are they on the out? Is Dabo on the out? He mentioned the wins in a post-game press conference, talking to reporters and kind of being a little bit somber. We're not used to seeing Dabo in a somber mindset. We're not used to see him kind of, not really expecting the future. It's not really painted. It's not etched in stone. There's not really a solid game plan even after this game. Just real quick, do we expect Dabo Swinney to pick up the pieces, or do we see a regime shift in the future?
I think that entirely lies in one question. Is he going to start utilizing the transfer portal? Back when it opened up like the Wild West a couple years back, he came out and he said, we're not doing that. We're going to stick with the guys that we've recruited here. We're going to build a culture here, and we don't need to bring in other folks. He got a little bit of flack for it. After losing to Duke, he's getting hammered with criticism about literally screwing his team by not acquiring more talent. I've got mixed opinions about it. I think that overusing the transfer portal can kill your culture. Why do you want to come to a school and sit 1 year, and then when it's your time to shine in year 2 or year 3, they're just going to pick up somebody else to take your spot coming from another school? That's not really a great sales pitch. But again, I think it's just going to depend if Dabo makes some adjustments. If he wants to stick to his guns, business as usual, yeah, we might see a problem here. I think the Dabo controversy right now, it kind of should apply to every head coach in the country. And that is this: give them just a little bit more time. Give them just a little more time. If you follow Michigan football, if you follow college football at all, you know that the Michigan fans were fed up with Jim Harbaugh after the 2020 season. They won 2 games in the COVID year. Jim Harbaugh is taking interviews with the Vikings. He took his final interview on National Signing Day, and the whole fan base said, "Get him out of here. I don't even care who we replace him with. Anybody's better than him." Well, guess what? He got just a little bit more time, and now Michigan's back-to-back Big Ten champion. Beat Ohio State back-to-back years. Back-to-back playoff berths. So just give him a little bit more time, especially to Dabo, especially since next year, like I alluded to earlier, Dabo could lose 3 games in the regular season next year, and they're still going to put Clemson in the playoffs. In a 12-team playoff, if all you lose to is Florida State and UNC, and then pick another game, I think they got to go keep playing Notre Dame. If you just lose those 3 games and those 3 teams stay ranked, you're making the playoffs. You're fine. If you looked at the final rankings from last year before the conference championship games, there would have been 3 or 4 9-3 teams that would have made the playoffs. So stuff can happen. You don't have to do a 180 to stay afloat right now. There's a lot going on, and I would urge every fan base not to put their coach on the hot seat this year. Give him just a little bit more time, especially since next year the floodgates open on the opportunities.
100%. I think you bring up a good comparison there with Harbaugh and Michigan. They definitely took their time with Harbaugh, going through the trials and tribulations, facing some tough seasons, tough losses, and they really haven't got to the finish line yet, but they're so close. They're so close. They're going to trust it all the way through, and they're going to trust it with their guy in Jim Harbaugh. And I think Dabo Swinney has earned that right to also be, allow some more time. Give me some more time to kind of figure things out. Obviously, the transfer portal might not have worked for his benefit, but it could have possibly worked at his detriment, losing DJ and whatnot. But You can't think about that. You can't get hung up in the past, but I think you do have to move into a open mind towards the transfer portal, because if you don't utilize it to your benefit, it will work against you, whether you like it or not. And you can try to build a culture and build all these, build a dynasty and things like that. And you have the perfect place to do it in Clemson, but you have to kind of play the game nowadays. It's a little different than it used to be. But if you can play the game and play the cards you're dealt, you might even be able to trade a couple cards and get some better cards in your deck. So all things to be put in perspective. Let's move on to week 2 a little bit. Let's talk about some big impactful games going into week 2. Just real quick. Do you want to just go over the most impactful games? We'll start with Nebraska and Colorado. Talked about it a little bit. What are we expecting out of this list of impactful week 2 games?
So really, in week 2, we talked about week 1, maybe don't jump to conclusions. In week 2, maybe you can get a little closer to jumping to some conclusions. Like you just alluded to, the Nebraska-Colorado game, I talked about this a little bit earlier. I think a win for Colorado brings them into the conversation even deeper than they already are. They're ranked this week. They gave them credit where credit was due. I think that if Colorado wins this week hosting Nebraska, I think that media is going to go crazy over this. It's kind of like when Texas wins, right? Is Texas back? Are they not back? The same question is going to be asked. The same question is, what is the ceiling going to be for Colorado this year? That's what people want to know, right? And I think that could be a huge talking point if they not only win this week but handle business. Now, I really don't think that Nebraska can come in and put up the type of numbers that TCU did last week. Jeff Sims threw 1 touchdown to 3 interceptions last week. They looked horrible. I would really be surprised if Colorado gives up 42 points like they just did to TCU. I'd be surprised if Nebraska can put up more than 2 touchdowns, honestly. And if Colorado can capitalize on that and put up another 45-point game, the media is going to go crazy over this. And I think the whole college football community will too. It's going to be a lot of talk about who they are. Now, from the Nebraska side, I don't really think it's impactful for Nebraska. I think they'll have a little bit more wind in their sails if they go into Colorado and win. I think that some people who aren't very familiar with the program and familiar with Matt Rule watched last week's game, which they really should have won, and said, is Matt Rule Scott Frost 2.0? If you know much about him, you know that he builds programs, but not in year 1. Typically, his year 1 teams get 1 win. I think that happened both at Temple and Baylor. In year 3, they become double-digit win teams. Even Baylor won the Big 12 his last year there. So, actually, it wasn't his last year there. He handed it off to Dave Aranda, and then they won the Big 12. But regardless, Matt Rule is a builder of programs. It doesn't matter if they win or lose this week. I think people just want to see Nebraska play well. It means everything to Colorado.
Yes, it does. And you bring up some good points there about Matt Rule and his ability to build a team. Rome wasn't built in a day. So it's that same mentality. And I think that mentality can be used as a blanket mentality for some of these big win now programs that might have lost in week 1. A couple other games to look at: Ole Miss at Tulane. You got Texas A&M at Miami. And then obviously Texas at Bama, which everyone's kind of looking forward to. What are we looking for with that game? Is Bama still the old Bama that basically is the cream of the crop? Is Texas back? Basically, just what you just said. What's going to happen in this game? Too early to tell, I know, but just to kind of foreshadow a little bit.
I think this game is going to draw the most headlines next week, other than any other game on the docket for this weekend. If Texas wins, Texas is back. That's what the fan base expects. Steve Sarkisian was brought in to bring Texas back. He brought in Quinn Ewers to bring Texas back. If they win this game, you're not going to hear the end of it. It doesn't even matter if Texas goes on to lose their next game or maybe the next 2, which they wouldn't. But that's all you would hear about is Texas beating Bama. Very similar to when LSU beat Bama last year. Brian Kelly says, hey, I'm here to do that. I'm here to beat Bama. That's everybody's favorite thing to do, and rightfully so. Bama's a storied dynasty. On the flip side of that, I think Nick Saban's got something to prove this year. There was so much talk this offseason. I can't believe I just said offseason. There's no offseason in college football. There
It's
was
true.
so much talk about, is this the end of the Nick Saban dynasty? Is Saban done for? Will Saban ever win a national championship? There's been people who have gone out on a limb and said if he wants to win another, he has to do it this year. I don't really know if I agree with that. If you look at the records of Bama seasons past, every time Nick Saban only wins 9 games, you know what he does the next year? He wins a
He goes
natty.
and wins it all.
He
Yep.
goes and he wins it all. So I've not lost any faith in Alabama. I think Jalen Milroe looks insane. That dude is a tank. A lot of people are talking about what an athlete other quarterbacks are like. Sorry,
Did I lose
I,
you?
yeah, I got muted there. Regardless, Jalen Milroe looks insane. Bama's starting to do what everybody wanted them to do, and that's run the ball down their opponents' throats. Last year, it was the Bryce Young show, and people called him out for that. People said, your offense is kind of a one-trick pony. Now, it's not just one trick because Bama always has amazing wide receivers. Regardless, though, people were saying that. People said if Bama wants to come back, they've got to learn to run the football again, and they're doing just that. I expect this to be an absolute fireworks show. I am more excited for this game than any other game on the schedule this weekend.
Might make the highlight reel before the game even happens for the GCP. Texas at Bama. Big week 2 game. Couple more. Illinois at Kansas. Utah at Baylor that we alluded to as well. And then to wrap it up, Oregon at Texas Tech. Oregon at Texas Tech. So, I mean, can the Red Raiders come back and basically reclaim, what they, what we've known, and we know that they are capable of it, but are they able to do it with the current, tools and arsenal that they have right now? Oregon obviously comes out as the more strong team. Seems cut and dry. What would deter us from that mindset? Anything?
I think the only way that you could spin this into a Texas Tech advantage is just, again, I think I've said it a couple times, just their backs to the wall. Just one of those things where, Oregon is going to come in maybe overlooking Texas Tech, which I find that hard to believe, but some people are going to try to tell you guys that this week. Oregon's overlooking them. They just put up 81 points against Portland State. Maybe they're preparing for their USC game in a couple weeks. I don't buy it. I don't think Oregon's going to overlook them at all. I think that they've got the perfect roadmap on how to beat Texas Tech now that they've seen it, and I think they're going to execute that. And unless Texas Tech can pull some 5 stars out of their pocket and insert those onto the field, I think they're going to get run over. I wouldn't blame anybody if they tease this game back to Oregon minus double digits. Call it 10.
Wow, you heard it here first, folks. I might do that myself and put that to the test because I think it could happen. I think it
It'd
could
be
happen
great value
really,
play.
very realistically. It can happen based on what we've seen, not just what's on paper, but what we saw play style wise. You can see the intangibles. You can only see that by watching the game. So I'm not really feeling too good about Texas Tech and the Red Raiders right now. Feeling good about the Oregon Ducks, but this is their first true opponent. I don't think we can throw Portland State in there as a true opponent, but the margin that they beat them by can definitely be taken into account. They can put points on the board. They can run it up on a team. They can open it up offensive wise, and they can make it happen and put the ball in the end zone. So that's as cut and dry as it really needs to be for much of the conversation. But we'll wait and see on this one as well. So that brings us to the end of the show. Real quick, how do you feel about your Michigan Wolverines? I'll tell you how I feel about my Spartans after that. Obviously, not too stellar on my end, but I want to know how you feel after the East Carolina game.
I felt good about it. I feel like not enough people are talking about the defensive performance that Michigan had. If you know much about the program, you know that we were running some second stringers. Rod Moore was out. Will Johnson did not play, and we still held him to just a field goal in garbage time. It was a really good game defensively. I was very impressed. From the offensive side of the ball, I want to see Alex Orji play more. I'm concerned that guy is such a stellar athlete that he might just pack up and transfer if he doesn't get some play time. I think Michigan has a unique opportunity here in the next couple weeks, maybe even 3 weeks. I'm not going to overlook Rutgers, though. In the next couple weeks to give Alex Orji snaps, let him prove that he can take over for JJ when he's gone. One big takeaway, I love seeing Roman Wilson get all those receptions. He dropped one pretty early in the game, and I was thinking, okay, here we go. But he didn't drop another pass after that, and he really lit it up. I was super impressed with him. I was very happy to see Colson Loveland get a lot of snaps there and a good handful of receptions. The fan base was a little worried that with the transfer of A.J. Barner, that he might come in and be the team's leading receiver this year as a tight end, just because of his size and his route running ability. And I was good to see that we didn't just sell out Colson Loveland like that. I thought the running game looked good. I always love to see us run the ball down their throats. So I was happy. I was impressed. I'm just hoping we get some more folks in the mix in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, definitely. That's what these early weeks are for, is getting those new guys in the mix and seeing who can play in a real game situation. That's what's important to see, is who can play, not only play and take the field and play the position, but who can excel, who can play well, who can, succeed at a high level in the position they're playing. That's what needs to be seen. That's what notes are being taken on in these early games. For Michigan State, I think it's, kind of rebuilding. Noah Kim is in there at quarterback. You need him to do good, need him to do well, take control of that team, do what Peyton Thorne couldn't do, that type of thing. I was worried there, very low scoring game in the early stages there going into halftime. They opened it up in the second half. And I took CMU to cover the 14 points, did not cash. Didn't have faith in Sparty going into that game. And they opened my eyes a little bit. They did it a little bit late. If the game would have finished out how it started in the first half, in the second half, then I might have covered my bet. State might have not even won that game if it continued that way. So I need more fireworks. I need to see more fire early, because Sparty is known for playing from behind and trying to catch back up in a game rather than trying to crush a team and beat the brakes off them. So I need to see more of that going into week 2. But other than that, it's still very early. We'll leave it at that. Sam, you got any final thoughts for the people going into the weekend?
Oh, definitely catch this Texas and Bama game, primetime game. So there's no excuse to miss it. You don't have a round of golf to play. You don't have your niece or nephew's birthday party at 8:00. You can definitely tune into this one. It's going to be a great one.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Got a lot of football coming up this weekend. Chiefs and Lions kick off here in just about 2 hours, just under 2 hours. So we're excited for that one. Going to be watching the kickoff of NFL football in coercion with college football. I mean, it's just a whirlwind of sports going on. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful time to be alive. Beautiful time of the year. It's the beginning of the Christmas season. So this leads us all the way into the new year, into March Madness, and that's where we embark on new endeavors from there. So we're in good hands. We're in good hands for the next couple months, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, we'll leave it at that. Guys, make sure to check us out on social media at Gin Sports Network on IG, and find everything on our link tree, which is in the bottom of this podcast. Find everything, articles, updates, IG posts on our website, ginsportsnetwork.com. And be sure to check out new episodes of the Gin College Podcast, along with all of our podcasts on the Gin Podcast Network. So for now, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for tuning into the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, John J. II, here with Sam Vitale.